Rain lashed the cracked concrete of the deserted bus stop, each drop exploding like a tiny cold bomb against the warped plastic bench. Only one creature braved the downpour. An elderly tabby cat, fur plastered dark against his thin frame, sat, rigidly upright on the bench's edge. Water streamed down his whiskered face, dripping from his chin, but his gaze never wavered. It was fixed, with an intensity that bordered on sacred, down the empty, rain-slicked street where the number 17 bus should appear. This wasn't shelter-seeking. This was vigil. Every night as streetlights flickered on and the city exhaled, its workers, he was there, waiting, watching. A silent monument to an arrival scheduled by a clock long stopped. Tonight, the storm made his devotion feel less noble, more desperate, fragile. His ribs shuddered with each shallow breath beneath the soaked fur. Elena slammed her apartment window shut, the sudden gust spraying rainwater onto her cheek. Her gaze, pulled by habit now, went straight to the bus stop below. There he was. Again. The sight punched her in the gut, harder tonight. 3 weeks she'd watched him. 3 weeks of seeing him arrive precisely at 7:15 p.m., settle on the bench, and remain statue still until the last bus groaned past well after midnight. Then, only then, would he melt into the shadows, a ghost slipping back into the damp alleyways. She'd tried once, early on, approaching with soft words and an open can of tuna. He'd vanished before she'd crossed half the street, a blur of wet fur and primal fear. But tonight felt different. The wind howled, tearing at the meager awning over the stop. The cat flinched as a gust nearly knocked him sideways, his claws scraping audibly on the plastic. He didn't run. He just hunched lower, trembling, violently, his unwavering stare fixed down the dark street. Something ancient and protective stirred in Elena. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was a plea she couldn't ignore, carried on the storm's breath. Grabbing her thickest raincoat and an umbrella that immediately threatened to invert, Elena bolted down the 3 flights of stairs. The street was a river, cold water soaking, her sneakers instantly. She approached slowly, umbrella held low, speaking softly, nonsensically, her voice nearly lost in the roar of the rain. "Hey there, big guy. Nasty night, huh? Just me, just Elena." The cat's head snapped towards her. In the sickly yellow glow of the streetlight, his eyes were wide, green pools reflecting pure terror. He hissed, a thin, ragged sound, baring yellowed teeth. But he didn't bolt. He couldn't. His thin body was shuddering violently, his breathing shallow and rapid. He looked breakable. Elena stopped 10 feet away, crouching low, making herself small. Okay, no rush. Just let's get you out of this." She inched forward, holding out a hand, palm down. The rain drummed on her umbrella like frantic fingers. He watched her hand as if it were a viper. His nostrils flared, taking in her scent, damp wool, coffee, the faint trace of lavender soap. Then something shifted. Not trust, not yet, but a dawning, desperate calculation. The storm was winning. A violent tremor racked him, and a low, pained whine escaped his throat, a sound so unlike the earlier hiss, it stopped Elena's breath. It was pure vulnerability. As she inched closer, her own heart hammering against her ribs, she saw it. Not just exhaustion, but injury. A deep, angry gash, partially hidden by matted fur, ran along his left flank. It looked old, infected, weeping, a thin, pinkish fluid diluted by the rain. That's why he hadn't run. That's why he sat, enduring the storm. His mission outweighed his pain. The mystery deepened, twisting into something darker. Who had hurt him? Why wait here, injured, night after night? "Oh, sweetheart," Elena breathed, the endearment escaping before she could stop it. The cat flinched at the sound, but didn't retreat. His eyes, still wide with fear, now held a flicker of something else, a profound weariness, a deep, aching sorrow that seemed older than the rain-slicked pavement. He slowly, deliberately, turned his head back towards the empty street where the bus should be. That simple movement, that resolute turning away from potential help towards an empty void, was more heartbreaking than any cry. Elena felt a lump rise in her throat. This wasn't just a stray. This was a soul bound by chains of memory, shackled to a ghost. The bus stop bench was his altar, the arriving buses his false messiahs. She needed to move him. Now. The infection, the exposure, he wouldn't last another night like this. But how? He was feral, terrified, and clearly devoted to his pointless vigil. She remembered the tuna can discarded in her haste. Slowly, carefully, she slid her backpack off her shoulders, the movement causing the cat to tense, his ears flattening. Keeping her eyes averted, trying to project calm she didn't feel, she rummaged inside. Her fingers closed around a slightly dented can of sardines she kept for emergencies. The snick hiss of the pull tab sounded like thunder in the tense space between them. The cat's head whipped back around, nostrils flaring wildly. The pungent, oily smell cut through the damp air. Elena carefully slid the open can across the wet pavement towards him, stopping a few feet short. "Here, it's okay. Just something for you." He stared at the offering, then at Elena, then back at the empty street. Hunger warred with duty, pain with ingrained caution. The storm raged around them, a cocoon of noise and water. Hesitantly, painfully, he slid off the bench. His landing was unsteady, a stumble that sent a fresh jolt of agony through him, visible in the tightening of his muscles. He limped towards the can, each step a visible effort, keeping his body low, ready to flee. He reached it, sniffed cautiously, then began to eat with desperate, ravenous gulps, his eyes darting constantly between the food and Elena. She remained frozen, crouched in the rain, her umbrella the only shield between them and the deluge. This fragile truce, built on fish oil and shared misery, felt like walking on shattered glass. As he ate, Elena noticed something else. Tucked partially under the bench, shielded from the worst of the rain by its plastic bulk, was a small, sodden object. It wasn't trash, it looked like a child's mitten. Tiny, knitted, bright red, though faded and grimy. Had he brought it here? Was it his? Or a relic of the one he waited for? The mystery coiled tighter, a cold serpent around her heart. The cat finished the sardines, licking the can meticulously clean despite his obvious pain. He looked up, at Elena, his green eyes meeting hers directly for the first time. The fear was still there, banked but present. But beneath it swam a profound, unutterable sadness. And something else. A flicker of fragile, nascent connection. He took a single, limping step towards her, then stopped, glancing back towards the street. A bus's distant headlights appeared, rounding a far corner, growing brighter. The number 17, hope, sudden and terrifying, ignited in the cat's eyes. He forgot Elena, forgot the pain, forgot everything. He scrambled, clumsy and agonized, back onto the bench, sitting bolt upright, trembling not from cold now, but from desperate anticipation. His entire being focused on the approaching lights, his ragged breathing quickening. This was it. The moment he lived for. Elena watched, her heart breaking anew. The bus rumbled closer, its brakes squealing as it pulled into the stop. The doors hissed open, revealing the warm, dry interior, empty save for the driver. The cat stood, his tail twitching, his eyes fixed on the doorway. He took a step forward, a low, questioning mewl escaping him, a sound full of decades of longing. The driver, a bored-looking man chewing gum, glanced out, saw the wet cat, and shook his head dismissively. "Shoo! Scram!" The doors hissed shut. The engine revved. The cat froze. The hope in his eyes didn't just fade, it shattered. It imploded into a void of utter desolation so profound Elena gasped. He didn't move as the bus pulled away, its red taillights disappearing into the rainy gloom. He just stood there on the bench, soaked, shivering, the wound on his flank a livid reminder of his suffering, staring into the nothingness left behind. The rain plastered his fur flat, making him look impossibly small and broken. The tiny red mitten lay forgotten under the bench, a silent testament to a love lost. Elena couldn't bear it. The sight of his utter collapse, the crushing weight of his perpetual disappointment, broke through her caution. She stood, letting the umbrella fall clattering to the pavement, forgotten. She took 2 quick steps towards him. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice thick with tears she hadn't realized were falling. "He's not coming, sweetheart. He's not coming back." She reached out slowly, her hand trembling almost as much as the cat. He turned his head. The desolation in his eyes was bottomless. He didn't hiss. He didn't flee. He just looked at her outstretched hand, then back at the empty street, a low, broken sound vibrating in his chest. It was the sound of a heart finally cracking open after years of holding itself together. He swayed. Then, as if the last string holding him upright had been cut, his legs buckled. He collapsed sideways onto the wet bench, a small, sodden heap of fur and despair, his eyes fluttering shut. Unconscious, or worse? The rain hammered down, indifferent, washing over his still form. Elena lunged forward, her cry lost in the storm's roar. "No, hang on, please, hang on!" Her fingers, cold and numb, finally brushed against his soaked fur. It was ice cold. Elena's fingers, numb with cold and terror, pressed against the cat's sodden chest. Beneath the icy, matted fur, she felt nothing. No reassuring thump, no subtle rise and fall, just a terrifying stillness. Rain lashed her, face stinging her eyes, mixing with the hot tears streaming down her cheeks. "No, no, no!" The cry tore from her throat, raw and desperate, lost in the storm's howl. The weight of his small, broken body, the utter finality of his collapse, after that soul-shattering disappointment, threatened to crush her. She couldn't lose him like this. Not after witnessing the depth of his devotion, the raw, unspoken tragedy of his weight. Instinct, fueled by a surge of primal protectiveness, took over. Forget caution, forget fear. She scooped the limp form into her arms, cradling him against her chest, shielding him as best she could with her own body from the relentless downpour. He was terrifyingly light, a bundle of wet fur and fragile bones. His head lolled against her arm, eyes closed, mouth slightly open. The infected gash on his flank felt hot even through her soaked sleeve. She ran, sneakers slipping on the slick pavement. Heart hammering a frantic drum solo against her ribs, she bolted across the deserted street towards the warm, yellow glow of her apartment building lobby. Every second felt like an eternity. Every ragged breath he didn't take a knife twisting in her gut. The warmth of the lobby hit her like a physical blow after the icy deluge. The sudden silence, broken only by the drumming rain on the glass, doors and her own gasping breaths, was jarring. She stumbled towards the worn armchair in the corner, gently laying the cat on its faded floral upholstery. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, he looked even worse. Pallor beneath the tabby stripes, lips tinged faintly blue. Panic threatened to paralyze her. CPR. For a cat? Fragmented memories of a pet first aid article surfaced. Clear the airway. Small breaths. With trembling hands, she tilted his head back slightly, checked his mouth. Clear. Pinching his muzzle gently closed, she covered his nose with her mouth and blew 2 small, careful puffs of air into him. She watched his chest. Nothing. Compressions. Placing 2 fingers just behind his front elbows, she pressed down gently, rhythmically, counting under her breath, her own breath coming in terrified. Hitches. 1, 2, 3 and breathe. 1, 2, 3 a breathe. Time dissolved. The only reality was the fragile body under her hands, the rhythmic pressure of her fingers, the desperate puff of her breath, the frantic prayer looping in her mind. Please, please, don't leave, not yet. The lobby's stale air smelled of wet wool, damp cat, and fear. Her muscles burned. Doubt screamed, "It's too late, you're too late." But she kept going. 1, 2, 3, breathe, and then a miracle. A faint, wet cough. A shudder ran through his small frame. Another cough, stronger this time. His chest hitched, then rose in a shallow, agonized breath. Then another. His eyelids fluttered, revealing a sliver of dazed, unfocused green. Relief, so potent it was almost painful, flooded Elena. She slumped back, gasping, tears flowing freely now. "Oh, thank God," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Just breathe, sweetheart. Just breathe. He lay there, wheezing slightly, eyes half open, gazing blearily at the unfamiliar ceiling. He was alive. But the battle was far from won. The infection, the exposure, the sheer trauma. He was hanging by the thinnest of threads. Getting him upstairs to her small apartment was a blur of gentle maneuvering and whispered reassurances. She wrapped him in the driest towel she could find, creating a makeshift nest on her sofa, away from drafts. His eyes tracked her movements, wide with confusion and residual fear, but he lacked the strength to resist. The profound vulnerability in his gaze was a physical ache. She needed a vet. Now. Frantic calls revealed the nearest 24-hour emergency clinic was a 20-minute drive away. 20 minutes he might not have. Gathering him carefully back into the towel bundle, she carried him down to her car, the rain still, hammering the roof. He trembled violently against her, a low, continuous whine escaping him. Every bump in the road made him flinch, his claws pricking weakly through the towel. She drove with one hand lightly resting on the bundle, murmuring constant, nonsensical comfort. Almost there. You're so brave, just hold on. His eyes, reflecting the passing streetlights, held hers for a long moment in the rearview mirror, a silent exchange of shared terror and fragile hope. Bonding. Moment 1. The shared fear. In the trembling vulnerability of that car ride, a silent pact was forged in the dark. The sterile, bright lights and sharp smells of the emergency clinic were jarring. The veterinary team moved with efficient urgency. Elena hovered, feeling useless as they assessed him, checking vitals, examining the angry wound, hooking him up to fluids. The diagnosis was grim: severe hypothermia, advanced infection threatening sepsis, dehydration, and malnutrition. "He's an old boy and he's been through hell," the vet, a woman with kind eyes and a weary face, said gently. "The next 24 hours are critical. We'll do everything we can." Elena signed forms, her hand shaking. The cost was staggering, but the thought of giving up on him now was unthinkable. She left her number, the image of him lying small and still, on the stainless steel table, oxygen mask over his muzzle, seared into her mind. The apartment felt cavernously empty and silent without him. Rain still streaked the windows. She picked up her soaked raincoat from the floor, something small and hard falling from the pocket. The little red mitten. She'd grabbed it automatically in the chaos. Holding it now, its tiny size, the faded knit, felt unbearably poignant. Who did it belong to? Why was it the cat's talisman? The mystery gnawed at her, intertwined with her fear for him. Sleep was impossible. She paced, jumped every time her phone buzzed, surviving on terrible coffee and gnawing anxiety. The dawn broke gray and damp, casting long shadows that mirrored the dread in her heart. The call came mid-morning. "He's stabilized," the vet said, relief evident in her voice. "He's a fighter. The antibiotics are starting to work and he's responding well to the fluids. He's not out of the woods, but he's turned a corner." Elena sank onto the sofa, weak with relief. She could visit that afternoon. Seeing him in the recovery kennel was both heartbreaking and hopeful. He lay on soft blankets, an IV line taped to his front leg, an Elizabethan collar around his neck. He looked small and shaved in patches, the cleaned wound now neatly stitched, but still an angry red line. But his eyes, when they opened and focused on her approaching the kennel door, they held a clarity that hadn't been there before. Not just fear, but recognition. A slow, tentative blink. Elena knelt, speaking softly through the bars. "Hey, warrior. Look at you." She slowly, carefully, extended a finger through the gap. He watched it intently, his breath catching. Then, with infinite slowness, he stretched his neck forward, ignoring the awkwardness of the collar, and gently, deliberately, touched the tip of his cold, pink nose to her fingertip. Bonding, moment 2. The touch of trust. It was electric. A silent acknowledgement. A fragile bridge built across a chasm of fear and loneliness. He needed days of intensive care. Elena visited religiously, sitting by his kennel, reading aloud, talking softly about nothing and everything. She brought the tiny red mitten, placing it just outside the kennel where he could see it. His eyes would fix on it, a deep, melancholic longing filling them, but also a flicker of something softer. Slowly, painstakingly, he began to heal. The infection receded. He started eating. The haunted, desperate edge in his eyes began to soften, replaced by a wary watchfulness. And sometimes, when Elena spoke in a particular soft tone, a glimmer of something like peace. Bringing him home felt momentous. He was still frail, needing medication and careful tending, but the life returning to him was palpable. He explored the apartment cautiously, sniffing corners, jumping stiffly onto the sofa only after several aborted attempts. He gravitated towards sunny patches on the rug, and he watched Elena, constantly, with a quiet intensity that was no longer about waiting for a bus, but about understanding this new human who smelled of antiseptic and kindness. One quiet evening, a week after his homecoming, he was curled beside her on the sofa as she gently applied ointment to his healing wound. He flinched initially, then relaxed into her touch, a low, rumbling purr starting deep in his chest. It was hesitant, rusty, like an engine unused for years, but undeniably there. Elena froze, tears pricking her eyes. The sound was a balm, a reward, a tiny miracle. He lifted his head, his green eyes meeting hers fully, unflinchingly. The sorrow was still there, a deep undercurrent, but layered now with something new, gratitude. A quiet, profound acceptance. Bonding moment. 3. The purr of belonging. In that shared silence, punctuated by the fragile rumble, the bond solidified. He wasn't waiting anymore. He was here. The mystery of the mitten still lingered. Elena had asked neighbors, posted online, but no one recognized it. Then, sorting through old community newsletters she'd kept for recycling, a small faded photo on the back page caught her eye. It showed a much younger version of Mrs. Henderson, the sweet, reclusive widow who had lived 3 doors down until her quiet passing 2 years prior. And beside her, beaming, was a little girl, maybe 5 years old, wearing a bright red knitted coat. On her hands, mittens, identical to the one found at the bus stop. Elena's breath hitched. Mrs. Henderson. She used to take her granddaughter Lily to the park every Saturday. The number 17 bus stopped right outside her building. Lily, who had tragically drowned in a lake during a family vacation 4 years ago, the pieces crashed together. The cat, likely Mrs. Henderson's companion, had witnessed the ritual, the waiting at the stop, the bus arriving, Lily's joyful greetings. After Lily's death, Mrs. Henderson had stopped going out, lost in grief. But the cat, he remembered. He kept the vigil. Night after night, he waited at the stop for the little girl who always arrived with laughter, clutching perhaps a lost mitten as a relic of her. The wound? A fight defending his territory near the sacred spot? Or an accident in his lonely, devoted wanderings? It didn't matter. His mission hadn't been for an owner who abandoned him, but for a beloved child who couldn't return. His loyalty wasn't misplaced. It was transcendent, spanning the chasm between life and loss. Elena sat on the floor beside the sofa where the old tabby, now named Jasper, meaning treasure keeper, slept deeply, his purr a soft, steady rhythm. The little red mitten lay beside him. She understood now the depth of the sorrow she'd seen in his eyes, the weight of the vigil he'd kept. She touched his head gently, her fingers sinking into the soft fur behind his ears. He stirred, opening his eyes, blinking slowly at her. There was no more frantic searching in his gaze, no desperate longing fixed on the door, just a quiet, deep contentment. He nudged her hand with his head, his purr deepening. He had finally found his way home, not to the ghost of a child, but to the living warmth of a heart that understood the language of unwavering loyalty. Some waits, and not with arrival, but with the quiet understanding that love, even when lost, can still lead you home.